Welcome to our Intangible Edge podcast, where we're going to explore how our clients are driving value and managing risk within their organization to create that competitive edge. I'm really lucky to have today a very, very dear friend of mine, Ernie from Rhino-Rack. And Ernie, it would be great if you could just give us a little bit of background about yourself and also your journey within Rhino-Rack. And for those people that certainly aren't within Australia, I think everyone in Australia knows who Rhino-Rack is, but maybe just a little bit about who Rhino-Rack is for our international viewers.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks very much for the opportunity, Mike. Real pleasure to be able to share some of the insights at Rhino-Rack. Look, just a quick snapshot of where we are. Rhino-Rack was founded in 1992. Still privately owned by the founder, Richard Cropley. We've got roughly about 200 staff based around Australia, which is our headquarters, New Zealand, and we also got an operation based in the US. Predominantly, we manufacture or design, manufacture and distribute roof racks and accessories throughout those three major markets, but also we're in over 60 countries around the world. So like you said, we are a well-known brand, and that recognition is increasing week on week. We're a clear market leader in Australia. We own roughly 45% of the market. It's a mix of aftermarket product, but we also work very closely with the OEMs. So original equipment manufacturers such as Toyota, Ford, Volkswagen, to name a few. We've got about over 800 outlets where our products are stocked in ANZ. And look, like everyone in this sort of market, we experience exceptional growth, and our opportunity really still lies in the US market.
And how long have you been with the business, Ernie?
Personally, look, I've been with Rhino-Rack for just close to 10 years, to be honest. In August, it's 10 years. In the industry, the automotive industry, over 23 years. Look, I come from, unfortunately, an engineering background. So I'm going to bombard you with data. But my roles obviously include design engineering, product management, sales and marketing, operations. I've been the general manager for Rhino-Rack, and in the last couple of years, my focus has been on the intangible assets for the business and developing those. So yeah, I'm the Chief Intangible Assets Officer for Rhino-Rack.
That's great. Well, let's touch on, that's a really salient point that you've just made. So what's a Chief Intangible Asset Officer? Sounds like a great title. And I think, according to the research that we've done, I think you have the claim of being the world's first Chief Intangible Asset Officer, or as we otherwise refer to you, the Chow.
The Chow. Yeah, so I'm not a cup of tea, right? So, but look, if we start quoting the S&P 500, 1975, the total value of a business, 17% of that was its intangible assets. In 2020, that is now rated at 90%. I mean, so there is a huge amount of value in organizations, and look, it's imperative now that businesses tap into that in terms of scaling. It's the most scalable assets that you have in your business. So, I can't see how this role isn't one of the most key roles for any organization.
Yeah, and so what was the journey in terms of, from a Rhino and a personal point of view to that realization about intangibles, and in particular, once you realized it, how did you find it internally?
All right, so to answer that question, I guess I've got to go back a couple of years, or maybe 5 years. And, just a bit of background, Rhino-Rack, in order to strive to where it is today, it lives by 5 imperatives. Right product and right service and the appropriate technology for where you are today. And it's not the latest technology, it's the most appropriate technology, right? Number 2 is understanding and reducing variation in your business. I can't emphasize how important that is in terms of simplifying and making your business or organization robust. Number 3 is a systems or process-based approach. That is, we make decisions based on fact and data, okay? So, gut feels great, but like we say, in God we trust, everyone else show me the data. Yeah. And look, let's be frank, 85% of issues in an organization are not people related. They are either lack of systems or processes, or they just don't exist, or they don't work. Number 4, very important, is leadership. The key intangible value, I think, or asset in an organization is the people that go home at night. That asset that these guys are operating 24/7, from the person that's on the floor to your executive team, they all have something to contribute, and they all have their own intangible value that they bring to an organization. Number 5 is creating a culture of relentless improvement and innovation. But again, you'll never get this change in an organization unless the business and its staff understand how to reduce variation in a business. So knowing those 5 imperatives, we embarked on a process of continual improvement by educating pretty much most of our staff, not just the leadership team. And obviously the work that we uncovered in going down this path, there was something there. There's something that we could say that there's some real true value in what we're developing, which was not just products, but the way we did things. A good example, we once thought that packing a 40-foot container by hand and making sure we squeezed every little cubic inch out of oxygen out of it was the most effective way to make the business profitable. But when you follow that process and you follow all the costs associated with doing something like that, you've still got to unload it. And so what we learned, apart from putting our staff in a position where it was an unsafe working practice, we realized that we needed about 6 people to hand unload a container, supply the pallets, do the shrink wrapping, put labels on it, and then load it into the warehouse. Since then, none of our product come hand stacked in a pallet, in a container. It's all packed on pallets, regardless of the size, regardless of the extra space they take. We found that we can now unload a container with 1 person in about 15 minutes and 0 injuries. So we thought, okay, well, we applied that methodology to our NPD process, okay? So that we could
So what's NPD for those people not familiar with it?
So new product development. So we're a product-based business, and obviously introducing new product into the market is how we stay ahead of our competition. And obviously one of our advantages is speed to market. And so having a predictable system or process that our product managers, our engineers, our quality officers, our operations team would follow meant that it gave us a competitive edge. So once again, we just knew that we were doing some good things, but we didn't really know what those things were called, apart from good practice. And so I guess it was when EverEdge invited me to a breakfast in the city one day, and I heard the speakers talk about the definition of intangible assets and their value, that I made the correlation between the stuff that we were doing at Rhino-Rack and the stuff you guys were talking about that added true value and scalability. So if we talk about scale, then for me, it made so much sense that if you've got a really good, robust, I'll call it the NPD system, I can add another 10 product managers tomorrow. As long as they follow that process and that system that we've implemented, that is proprietary information to Rhino-Rack, to suit Rhino-Rack, then I can scale the business. I can scale it in Australia, or I can introduce that process into the US, and I can scale the US team. That's the value that these intangible assets bring to your business.
Yeah. And so how did the journey, so you left the breakfast, and how did things go, when you walked back into the office? Did everyone know what you were talking about?
Look, that's the challenge, right? The new language. How do you change the mindset of some of the seasoned members of your leadership team that this is now not something that's sitting in the P&L, or something that's so valuable, but it's not sitting on the warehouse floor, or it's not capital, it's not machinery. So really it was about using real examples and somehow putting some value to it. So if I go back to the NPD process, how valuable is it to be the first to market in a business, and to register your IP, and to register the trademark? And when the competition comes at you and finds a way of competing with you, that you're already working on your 2nd and 3rd generation of product. what sort of value does that bring to a business? How does that pitch you in front of your OEM customer? Let's call them Toyota, which is one of our customers. When you've got new innovations, new technology, a database of information that you've been collating, which your competitors don't have.
Yeah.
What value does that really bring to your business? And obviously, being able to explain that with real life examples was the key. And obviously, over communication. One thing that we did do, which is probably one thing I just did relentlessly, and I still do it to this day, and anyone who talks to me knows that my language has changed, is when everyone said, oh, that's IP, or that's a trademark, or that's a register of information. I said, no, that's an intangible asset. Okay, let's change the language. All those things you're talking about, how they're palletized differently, is an intangible asset to the business. Keep the drawings, don't share them. They don't go on a thumb drive. They're not discussed with anyone outside the organization. Right.
And so how did do you want to talk about that first meeting with the CFO? Because, intangibles do exist on the balance sheet. And yeah, how was that journey?
Well, that was a challenge, because obviously there's standards of accounting, and they have their way of doing what they do. It's an accepted way with years of heritage. So how did we bring, let's say, the finance team into this? And again, the MPD process, as I keep talking about, is a critical process in our business to getting to market. So we engaged the finance team to support that process. So how did we do that? Well, we said, look, we need some detailed financial modeling. Okay, that's missing in our process. We know how to plug in forecasts and marketing intel, but we don't have a good financial model. Can you help us develop or be part of developing a good financial model for this process, so that we can present to the leadership team not only the research, but also the financial modeling? And you guys have helped us develop that. So there'll be a consistent output over and over, no matter what sort of product we introduce. That's how we engage them. And of course, when you start looking at the PPSR, for instance, the sort of things that you register with the PPSR, well, are they a key intangible? Absolutely, because you're deciding, you have a process in which you decide who of those customers you're going to register. There is a methodology that you've employed. So again, using their day-to-day experiences and translating that into hold on a minute, you are actually accruing an intangible asset there. Did you know that? And then explaining why it's such an intangible asset. Yeah, that's where EverEdge have assisted Rhino-Rack in being able to articulate that to the broader audience in Rhino-Rack.
And so, coming back to those assets, as we talked about, there was a couple of the pretty key assets that both Richard, the owner, knew that you had, and also through the work that we did with you, that we were able to highlight. That again, from the outside looking in, from a competitor's point of view, were absolutely assets, but maybe hadn't been identified, within Rhino, and also what some of the work, that's happened since.
Yeah, so I think, in any manufacturing business organization, your bill of materials is your secret sauce, right? It details not only what goes into your product, it's got supplier information, it's got the type of finish, it stipulates in some of the detailed bill of materials we have, the testing criteria, quality standards. I mean, literally, they are the heart and soul. I call them the crown jewels of an organization. We treated them as just files in a drive, like in any other organization where anyone had access. After we identified that our bill of materials are the crown jewels of the business, we've got to protect them. How do we protect them? Well, obviously, there's things that you do, like you're limiting access. You don't allow, for instance, your engineers who have got access to those bill of materials to put them on thumb drives, so that potentially they can be lost or downloaded on their own personal computer. There's things that we started to do that we just took for granted. And look, this is the journey you go down. Once you start identifying these assets, you then start working towards, so what are the risks associated with those assets, and then how do we protect them? What processes do we have to put in place to protect those assets.
Yeah, and I mean, again, one of the other journeys you've gone through is, of course, going from offshore manufacturing to onshore manufacturing. Do you want to just talk briefly about that?
Yeah, so like a lot of businesses, to remain competitive, we went down that route of looking for alternative manufacturers offshore. The problem with that is you're teaching them how to make your product. You're teaching them how to be a competitor. We experienced that firsthand, where we found that some of the manufacturers making our product were also approaching our customers. So we knew that, we were just educating, providing the information, the test criteria for these guys, not only to make our product, but also how to market it. So look, COVID has accelerated our initiative. We always had that as part of our plan, but we used the opportunity to fast track bringing manufacturing back to Australia. And I can report today that over 50% of our product now is Australian made. That's
great. And just coming back to, data is obviously an asset that lots of people talk about. Yeah. And certainly when we first started to work with you and the team, you knew the importance of data, but it's about understanding, where that data has value. And do you want to maybe share some of the journey there?
Yeah, I mean, Rhino-Rack, like I explained, its Australian business is predominantly B2B. So we've got a very well-established dealer network. And so in the beginning, Rhino-Rack believed that its database was its dealer network. That's where it was. That's where it ended. That we would rely on them to communicate to the end user, who is truly our customer. So that was something that we were missing at Rhino-Rack. And during this process, we identified that we've got no contact with our key intangible assets there, which are our customers, who we market to, who we speak to, who we understand the behaviors. So to this day, you may see it on our website, Mike, we've got an aggressive initiative there to build our end user database. And, we're giving away in December this year, a $85,000 Ford Raptor to build that database. But, there's a lot of layers behind that, a lot of work sitting in the background to actually drill down and understand who that customer is.
No, that's great. And Ernie, if you could go back, and talk to Ernie 3 years ago, what would you say about, I suppose, the process that you've been through in the last 3 years?
Look, the realization of the untapped assets that you have in a business, and it doesn't really matter how complex it is or how simple it is, to be able to identify those key assets in your business, like a simple thing like a process for order processing, or how you dispatch and how you communicate with your customer about lead times and forecasting, all those sort of things are your assets. We took all that for granted. When we did a survey with our customers, and I'm talking about our B2B customers, we would get, a very good score, but we didn't really were able to pinpoint why we're getting that score until we started to record what it was that we were doing well, and obviously what we could improve on. Those initiatives or that information that we then use to improve our processes, make our systems far more robust, use that information to help train our staff, they all contribute to the value of the business. And like I said before, it makes scaling the business so much easier.
And Ernie, it's, obviously Rhino-Rack's, a fantastic success story for Australia. It's got an incredible brand. You're now growing rapidly offshore, in particular in the US market. You've been with the business for a long time, and there's a number of businesses that maybe aren't of Rhino's size and scale. But again, what's the advice that you would give to those businesses based on the journey that, you've gone through in the last 18 months working with us, for example?
Look, whoever's listening to this podcast or recording, you're already halfway there. I think the fact that you've shown some interest in tapping into, the topic of intangible assets has put already a foot forward in my view, because you'll be able to relate to the sort of things I've been talking about today to your own business and your own organization. Confidential information, for instance, price lists, dealer information, all those sort of things are your key intangible assets. You've got to retain those. You've got to protect them. And so, you know, the business didn't know that language to start with. We knew they were important. We just didn't know how important they were in terms of protecting them in the business, and how that is that's where the true value is with Rhino-Rack, how you can, and then you can exploit that, right? So, you know, we're putting $3 ahead for every contact that we create on our website. I mean, that's kind of like how you can put the value towards some of these key intangible assets.
I think another interesting thing that I just recalled is how you and I met, Ernie. And I think it might be of interest for some of the people watching, because, you know, the relationship is normally around those registered rights, you know, intellectual property, registered intellectual property being patents and trademarks. But do you want to talk about how we met? Because it was not usual that we would be introduced by the person that introduced us.
I'm trying to remember.
Remind me,
Mike. Well, I'm thinking his assets now.
Just remember, your patent attorney is probably going to be watching this, which is, of course, Ken.
Yes, yeah. So our patent attorneys did introduce us, and obviously the topic of discussion was trademarks and our IP portfolio, and some registered designs, and then obviously the conversation then stemmed to, and what else? What else do you have? And I think we just started talking about how we train our people with GRIP, our Rhino improvement program. And you said, well, you know, that's a key intangible asset in your business, the fact that you train all your staff in how to improve your business, from the guy who's on the shop floor to the executive team. And we just didn't make that connection, right? So even the examples that we showcase to the broader audience in our business, those examples, those presentations are a key intangible asset for our business. And you need to retain those and hold on to them.
Yeah. Well, Ernie, I got to say thank you so much for your time. It's always great catching up with you and hearing the journey you've gone on. And, you know, I know we're super proud that, you know, you are literally, you know, #1 Chief Intangible Asset Officer. And I don't think anyone's going to be able to ever take that title away from you. So, you know, hopefully being able to work with some of the other clients that we do, you know, we're continuing to roll that position out, not just at the C-suite level, but obviously going into the board level and getting board directors to start to ask the right questions of the management team. But, you know, the success that Rhino had certainly before we came along, and the success that you're continuing to have is something I think that not just obviously, you know, Rich can be proud of and you and the management team, but that Australia can be proud of. It's an incredible brand that, you know, dominates a lot of roof space around Australia and the world. So thank you again. Feel free, any closing comments?
Closing comments. Look, real pleasure, Mike. Thanks for the invite. And I'm always glad to share RhinoRacks journey. And, you know, we're just on the start of it. There's so much more that we can do. The key thing is to engage the entire team. Closing comments. I think, look, one of the examples I've found success in sharing with anyone who prepared to listen to me is it had to be Instagram. And I think, you know, that was impactful for me because, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but Instagram was in debt for about $254,000. It had a staff of around 12 people. They were renting an office they couldn't afford, and zero revenue. And Facebook valued them at about $1 billion. Now they're worth what, $7 to $8 billion. Yeah. So what was it that was so important to a brand like Facebook to pay that sort of money? And like we talked about today, it wasn't anything physical. It wasn't in a P&L. It was it's their intangible assets. It was their database. And that's just one of the assets they had. In an organization, that's a number of things that you can identify. So look, if you want to use that as an example, by all means, that's the best way for me to actually describe how important the intangible assets portfolio is to any business.
Yeah, oh, that's great. Hey, look, thank you again for your time, mate. And look, we certainly love working with you and the team at Rhino. And yeah, I'm sure there'll be a number of takeaways from people based on some of the advice you've given today. So thanks again.
Real pleasure, Mike. Thank you again.
Cheers.